So good morning, everybody. It is great to see so many people here. Welcome to this apprenticeship update webinar for service providers. My name is Stephanie Hobbs, and my colleague Sherry Menard and I are your co-hosts today. We work for the Simcoe-Muskoka Workforce Development Board and Literacy Network, which functions as both a regional literacy network and a workforce planning board. We are presenting this webinar in collaboration with the Apprenticeship Committee of the Learning Networks of Ontario.
I'd like to start today with the land acknowledgement, and it's an important part of our presentation. So today I would like to start the virtual webinar with the land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge all of the Indigenous peoples' lands that we live on. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of these lands on which we work, live, and call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, First Nations people that call this land home. Today, we would like to start with, I'd like to introduce our first two speakers, Bill Swift and Jamie Rice. So I'm going to start off with an introduction to Bill. For the past 6 years, Bill Swift has been the manager of apprenticeship operations in the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, as the most recent stage of a more than 25-year career working in apprenticeship at the ministry level. He was previously a training consultant in the Thunder Bay office and developed the computer system that manages the apprenticeship function, helped set up and wind down the Ontario College of Trades, and most recently has supported the implementation of Skilled Trades Ontario. As a strong proponent for apprenticeship and skilled trades, he regrets that there was not more apprenticeship information available when he was in high school, as that would have been a much more productive use of his time than his first post-secondary endeavor. So as Jamie and Bill will be sharing a little bit of their time in each other's presentations, I'm also going to introduce to you Jamie Rice. Jamie works for Skilled Trades Ontario. She's worked in apprenticeship in the skilled trades area for approximately 20 years. Jamie started at the apprenticeship office of the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities as a training consultant, and she spent a number of years at the Ministry of Labour and Ontario College of Trades as an inspector and is currently a senior policy advisor at Skilled Trades Ontario. So now, Bill, if you would start us off. And you can share your screen and we'll get started.
Okay, so funny story. Yesterday, Jamie and I were talking in preparation for this, and we determined that we had differing expectation or understanding of who the audience was going to be. I think with the way that we've structured our two presentations, it might be better for Jamie to start off because she has more of a apprenticeship 101 type presentation.
Okay, perfect.
And then I'll follow up with mine, which is more geared towards what it is that Stowe does and what it is that the ministry does under the current setup. So I'll defer to Jamie.
We are nothing if not able to swiftly adapt. So Jamie, if your presentation is ready, please begin.
All right, thanks so much, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be representing Skilled Trades Ontario to your group. Skilled Trades Ontario just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. So it's pretty exciting time for us as an organization. Skilled Trades Ontario is just one of the many partners in the apprenticeship and skilled trade system in Ontario. We work, of course, most closely with the provincial ministry, and combined, the two really provide the full framework for apprenticeship in Ontario. So what exactly does Skilled Trades Ontario do? So this is our very specific mandate. First and foremost, Skilled Trades Ontario is responsible for establishing apprenticeship programs. We assess the experience and qualifications of individuals looking to be certified in a trade, but who have not completed an apprenticeship program. We, of course, issue certificates of qualifications and renew those certificates. We maintain a public register on our website and conduct research in relation to apprenticeship. So it's a very specific and pared down mandate compared to, say, a previous organization. But now, in conjunction with the ministry, as Bill will speak to in a little while, we do in fact sort of offer the full framework for apprenticeship in Ontario. So we spend a lot of time talking about apprenticeship to each other and to many stakeholders and to many groups. And of course, it's always, why pursue a career in the skilled trades? Well, our research, other research shows, and I'm sure that you have all seen the news headlines about how many jobs are available in the skilled trades. It's in demand. Employers are looking for people. So it's really sort of the buzzword right now. It's jobs, jobs, jobs in the skilled trades, and our research certainly backs that up. I always find it useful just to take a quick step back when talking about apprenticeship, to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what apprenticeship is, because I've been caught short in various presentations to say at the client level, where there's not always a solid understanding of what exactly apprenticeship is. So here's our working definition. It's an educational pathway that combines on-the-job and technical training. Apprentices spend 85, maybe even 90% of their time in an apprenticeship program on the job. And then the rest of that is spent in technical training at school between 1 and 3 times, depending on the trade. In Ontario, there are currently 144 trades with apprenticeship programs. That's a lot of choice. The Skilled Trades Ontario website on the trades information pages has a detailed description of all of those 144 trades. If people were still in the exploring sort of phase of things, wondering what trade might be right for them. Of those trades, 23 of them are compulsory, meaning of course that in order to work in a trade that's compulsory, the individual must either be a registered apprentice or licensed in that trade. The rest of them are non-compulsory. Now, for anybody who's been around for a while, you may remember the days where those trades were referred to as voluntary trades. We have switched up the terminology and they are now referred to as non-compulsory trades. Now, some of your clients may still be thinking, is apprenticeship right for me? I mean, it's a big decision when trying to decide a career path. And what we hear a lot from people is that they're a little hesitant if they have no experience in the trade, no family history of people in the trades, and they aren't sure if it's right for them. So we often like to refer to some key non-technical skills that employers find interesting, and always encourage clients to market themselves with these if in fact they don't have trades background, or even if they do have a trades background. These skills are really in demand as well. And we were happy to get this piece of research that brought these to the forefront. So if all of this is sounding interesting to a client and they think, yeah, apprenticeship really is for me, I want to take the dive, then it's how do you become an apprentice? And the actual program delivery of apprenticeship falls over to the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development. Bill, I'm not sure if you want to briefly chat about that right now, or if you want to hold that for your presentation to actually talk about the nuts and bolts of delivery. Oh, Okay, maybe we'll leave that for Bill to touch on when he presents. What I can tell you is that Skilled Trades Ontario, in conjunction with the ministry, has been working on an online portal, which is up and running right now, but is in no way a finished product. But the idea is that a lot of the initial registration and the back and forth paperwork is now happening online. There will be subsequent phases to the online portal, but right now there are a number of services that can happen online. And we're excited for future phases of the online portal to come about. Now, at the very end of apprenticeship, so after the apprentice has interacted with the ministry over a number of years throughout the program delivery of that, Skilled Trades Ontario jumps back into the picture. And once the ministry has issued a certificate of apprenticeship to a completed apprentice, Skilled Trades Ontario will follow up and issue a provisional certificate of qualification, which is good for a period of 12 months. This provisional is particularly important for individuals working in a compulsory trade because they will need that active provisional certificate to legally be allowed to continue working in their trade while they prepare to write their certifying exam. So this provisional certificate is different in nature than what people might have been used to under the previous organization. So things have switched up a little bit, but this is a very important part of the whole picture for people working towards their certification. On a quick note, it is possible to have a provisional certificate renewed. There is a little bit of paperwork involved, but most definitely it is an option. And I'm so sorry, I seem to have lost my screen for a moment. Sorry about that, everyone. Now, you may have clients who come to you with already a lot of experience, and we get this question a lot from people who have experience and they're maybe feeling a little bit discouraged about the prospect of starting all over again as a brand new apprentice, starting right at level 1 again. So we, of course, at Skilled Trades Ontario have the trade equivalency assessment process. We have a whole team dedicated to that. Individuals with prior experience can apply through this process to have their skills assessed, and it is possible to move forward and perhaps jump right to writing the certifying exam without doing a full apprenticeship. The guide and application form for this is very detailed, found on our website. We'll give you lots of great information about how to go through the process, but stated very simply, in order to be approved through this process, the individual must demonstrate that they have at least the equivalent amount of experience as somebody who has completed an Ontario apprenticeship program. That's sort of in one sentence the basics, but I really encourage people who think they might qualify to spend some time looking at that guide and seeing if it really is a suitable process for them. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for having me. And if you have any questions, I am more than happy to take them. I will stick around throughout Bill's presentation, so if there's any questions that are maybe a combination in nature, I will be here for that as well.
Okay, Jim has a question. So if you go into a non-compulsory trade, does it matter whether you're working for someone who has their journeyman certificate?
I can take that one.
Yeah, Bill, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no problem at all. So Jim is correct that it isn't an absolute requirement that for an apprenticeship training situation for the trainer to be a certified journey person. However, they do have to be evaluated as being at least a journey person equivalent. So the employment and training consultant will do an evaluation of the trainer's experience and determine whether they are the equivalent of a journey person. I mean, much like it sounds, but obviously it's a little simpler in that kind of a situation where the person is actually certified. And one thing that they will do as a part of the process is encourage the trainer to pursue certification through Skilled Trades Ontario, although again, not an absolute requirement. Does that address the question, Jim? Great.
I have another question here. Are there provisions for the equivalency for non-speaking, for non-English speakers, such as recent Ukrainian arrivals?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. Is there a bit more context for that?
Not in the chat box, but if the person who asked that question would like to turn their mic on and give some further background, that would be great.
Hi, it's Rob from the YMCA Employment Center in Midland. And we have a number of recent Ukrainian arrivals in our community. And we're just wondering, are there provisions or supports that might be available to those people to write an equivalency or make progress towards their certificate?
So from what I understand, there's nothing specific targeted to that group. We have a very dedicated team in the trade equivalency department who are processing applications, daily with, really great success in terms of diminishing sort of the wait times compared to a few years ago. But no, there's nothing specifically targeted to any particular group at the moment that I'm aware of.
So is there like a structured language requirement, or I know I'm getting fairly specific here, but
like, just out of curiosity, are you talking specifically about people who are already experienced in the trade and are looking to become certified in Ontario, or are you talking about people who perhaps don't have as much exposure to the trade and are looking to be registered as apprentices in Ontario, or is it both?
I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Irina, who works with a number of these folks. So I'll let her sort of be a little more specific on the question here.
Hi. I just have a question about the Ukrainians. So some of them, they already come with certificates, like they have some skills which they bring with them, but they're not able to work in Canada. So my question would be, in order to go through this equivalency assessment, what level of English do they need to have in order to be certified or go through the assessment? And what is the process like? Can they just send the paperwork to you? You would look at if they have enough hours and the experience they need. And yeah, so just basically the first steps. What would be the first steps?
Right. So thank you for the question. Yeah, that clarifies it. So what I would really encourage anyone to do is to go in on the Skilled Trades Ontario website and find the application guide for the trade equivalency assessment process. It gives great detail about what needs to be submitted. So in terms of language, of course, we ask that everything be sent to us in either English or French. So often that will mean that the individual has to have some documents translated before they are sent to us. If it's something like a diploma or a certificate or a license from outside of Canada in another language, we would ask that that be translated and sent to us. So there's no specific language level requirement to go through the trade equivalency assessment process. But of course, that's left to the individual who will be seeking employment, but that's outside of Skilled Trades Ontario jurisdiction. Understand that the exams are available only in English and French. However, there are provisions to, but Bill, you'll speak to this maybe a little bit, the possibility to write the exam with a translator. So that is an option, but that again is outside of Skilled Trades Ontario purview.
Okay, I have another question here. For compulsory trades, when is the temporary certificate in effect?
Wow, okay. That's getting down to the nitty gritty of things. So my understanding is that the certificate of apprenticeship and the provisional certificate of qualification are issued at more or less the same time. So as soon as an individual transitions from active apprentice to completed apprentice, they're essentially now the holder of a provisional certificate of qualification, which is good for a period of 12 months. Now, please forgive me if there's like a period of 24 or 48 hours where, you know, computer systems are talking to each other and you know, systems are being updated, but they happen more or less in tandem.
I think it was probably the 12-month figure they were looking for there, so.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Okay, the next question is, why are some trades compulsory and others not?
That's an amazing question. I will start by saying that Skilled Trades Ontario inherited the trades as compulsory or non-compulsory from the previous organization and even the system before that. The trades that are compulsory have been compulsory for a very long time. Bill, I'm not sure if you can put a little bit more historical spin on that.
Sure. And actually, for what it's worth, there was actually one trade that transitioned from being voluntary to
Yes.
compulsory under Ontario College of Trades, and that was a sprinkler and fire protection installer. But you're right, pretty much everything else, the designation of compulsory or non-compulsory or restricted, non-restricted, or compulsory, voluntary. We seem to like to change the terminology every few years. That really has been in place from when the ministry was solely responsible for this for quite some time. Generally speaking, a trade is made compulsory when industry feels that you know, there is a need to, I guess, make it, let's see, make it more robust, the requirements to work in the trade. Often there's an element of trades of public safety, where if someone is performing the work unsupervised, there needs to be, you know, there is an element of public safety if they are not fully certified, fully trained, that kind of thing. But a lot of it does depend on the, you know, what industry is looking for. So as an example, anything, any of the automotive trades, any of the motive power trades rather, like automotive service technician and such, if the person is not performing the work safely, then, you know, people driving the vehicles they've been working on could be, you know, at risk to themselves and to others. You know, plumber rather, construction electrician, that kind of thing. Those are ones where, you know, it's easy to see that public safety is an issue. Hairstylist, another one where, you know, they're working with very strong chemicals at times for some of the hairstyling. And again, risk to the public if they're not properly trained. There are some trades where the industry has chosen that they do not wish to be made compulsory for whatever reason. And general carpenter is a good example of that. You would think that there would be an element of public safety in that, but general carpenter is a sufficiently broad trade that in the past, when there has been talk of making it compulsory, not all of industry has agreed on that. So very long-winded answer to say it depends, but hopefully that has addressed the question.
Thank you, Bill. Another question from Patricia Graham is, for the compulsory trades, is the temporary certificate issued for every level or just the final or red seal certificate?
Okay, so just to clarify, the provisional certificate of qualification is it's like a bridge between active apprenticeship and when the individual has their certificate of qualification. So it's issued once an individual has completed their apprenticeship program and is waiting or preparing to write their certifying exam to obtain their certificate of qualification. So think of it as that bridge that allows the individual to legally work.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. So the next question is, when the MLITSD issues a certificate of apprenticeship, Skilled Trades Ontario will issue a provisional certificate of qualification good for 1 year. Good for 1 year. To give the tradesperson time to prepare to write the CFQ, or is that for compulsory trades only? And forgive me if that question is a repetition.
You've got it right. At the moment, provisional certificates are being issued to everyone across the board. I can't guarantee that that's going to always be the case when we think about non-compulsory trades, but for the moment, everyone is issued a provisional.
And
Thank
the
you.
thing I would add is that where we are talking about I still fall back to the old terminology. When we're talking about a non-compulsory trade, the person doesn't actually need to have a provisional certificate of qualification to work in the trade, because again, you don't have to have certification at all. So the reason that Stowe could eventually decide to just issue provisionals is what we sometimes call them, for compulsory trades, is that then allows the person to keep working. So that would be the distinction. But as Jamie said, for now, they're issuing the provisionals to all completed apprentices, and that just makes it a little more standard across the board.
Thank you. In order to become an apprentice, does an individual need to get their high school diploma?
So the entry requirements for various trades are set at what industry and the ministry have determined is the appropriate level of education. Most of the trades do have a grade 12 completion entrance requirement, but there are a few still that do have either a grade 10 or something under a grade 12 requirement. By and large, most of the trades though do require a high school diploma or equivalent.
Thank you. And does the online portal, or will the online portal, include information about supports available to apprentices? For example, is there a way that an apprentice can find upgrading supports to help them prepare for the in-class sessions or to help with exam preparation?
That is definitely something that we as an organization are striving towards. We really hope that in a mature state that we will be offering more wraparound supports for apprentices. At the moment, no, you will not find that on the Skilled Trades Ontario website.
Okay, just a couple more questions coming in here. So is it I'm not sure whether we answered this. So is it the industry that dictates whether a trade should be compulsory or not?
It's the industry that certainly helps inform the decision at the point that there is, that a trade is under consideration for changing from non-compulsory to compulsory. It would be unusual for it to be going the other way. That would be done. The process to determine whether that should happen would involve consultation with industry. So industry certainly has a large impact on that. I wouldn't say that they are, it isn't solely a decision on, industry's part. But, with the way things are structured, it would be likely Stowe who would be conducting those consultations and then making a recommendation to the minister accordingly.
Thank you. Just, where the trade requires grade 12, would a GED be accepted as equivalent, or is it firm on the grade 12 diploma?
A GED would be fine. So it is grade 12 or equivalent, or high school diploma or equivalent. And that could include foreign, equivalency as well, where whatever level of education the person had obtained has been evaluated by a credential evaluation service, for example, as being the equivalent of the Ontario grade 12, then that is fine. So yes, there are a number of alternatives in that. Quebec, we get people coming from Quebec who have a certain level of CEGEP training and such, and it's similar. There are equivalencies.
Okay, in your opinion, what is the greatest barrier right now to getting apprentices on board?
Well, according to every press release the ministry has issued in the past 10 years, it's the stigma against getting into the trades. So I think there is still a perception that that there is, that the trades are a lesser path, or that if you can't, if you just are not, you're in high school and you just do not seem to have the wherewithal to make it to college or university, that, trades is your third alternative. And that isn't the case. There are, some of the trades are very technical in nature. They do require a higher level of education or a higher level of knowledge. So I think it is a matter of getting past the feeling that the trades are lesser. That is the biggest barrier, really. Now, in some trades, someone might have a keen interest in being in a trade, and it might be difficult to get into because of whatever the hiring processes are. Certainly, many of the construction trades are unionized, and sometimes the union will have a number of requirements you have to meet in order to get in. So that can be a challenge as well. But it is, those are the ones that come most immediately to mind.
Yeah, I think I might just quickly add to that, that has certainly been the main barrier for many years. And now, luckily, we're also starting to turn our attention to recognize things as basic as, childcare can be a real barrier. I mean, construction workers, just for example, don't work regular 9-to-5 jobs, and to find proper childcare where, a worker may have to report to site for 6 a.m. is a real challenge and can often cut short what could be a really promising situation for a worker. So I'm really happy to report that we now sort of are able to take a step back and look at some of those other barriers beyond the one that's been lingering for so many decades. And I hope that we can over time start to chip away at some of those problems.
Did you leave?
No.
Okay, we've got just a couple more. I'm going to just give you a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to Bill's presentation. If the questions are not addressed in this webinar, we will certainly be doing a follow-up where we will get answers to those questions and send them out with our resources. So just a quick question here on, is there a list of trades that only require grade 10, or do they have to look up the requirements for each of their trades?
I'm not sure if we have the list actually displayed publicly. Bill, I think it's probably not an issue to provide a list. I might also add, though, that despite the fact that a trade may have a grade 10 entry requirement, employers are always able to seek a higher standard if they choose to. So that's maybe just something to be aware of. I mean, I'm not sure if it happens a lot, but an employer could ask that despite the entrance being grade 10, for example, could ask for grade 12 if they choose to. Bill, am I right on that?
That's correct, yes. The ministry sets minimum standards, but an employer is always, an employer or sponsor for apprentices is always, it's within their rights to set a higher standard if they so choose. For just to give you some insight, if you're looking for a list of the trades and what the requirements are, and you're dealing with either with one of our offices, at least one of the ministry's field offices, the code word you're looking for is superchart. So if you ask for the trades superchart, which is something that the ministry, I think, still maintains based on input from Stowe as to what has changed from the previous update. The superchart is something that we make available to our staff, and as Jamie said, there should not be any issue with making that available elsewhere. But I think she is right. I don't believe that is currently posted on the either on the Stowe site or anywhere by the ministry.
So in the interest of time, final question here is there a plan to increase the 1-to-1 ratio for apprenticeship to journeyman?
No, I don't believe there's any conversations happening about changing the ratios. They all changed relatively recently within the last 4 years, I'm going to say. And I don't see anything happening around changing that anytime soon.
Okay, we're going to move on to Bill's presentation. Again, as I mentioned, questions that haven't been addressed.
Sorry, you
at
can
this
come,
point.
sorry, yeah, it's okay, I'm just listening to this thing on trades.
Can you mute your mic, please?
So exciting, I'm just unlocked it for the printer agency folks, yeah. No worries. It's all about just people getting into trades and doing supports and not that exciting, but.
Sherry, I think you can mute people, can you not?
I can't see who's on there right now.
So I thought, whatever.
So,
I can be interrupted when I'm doing these. So.
could we all be sure to mute our mics moving forward, please? Bill, would you like to share your presentation with us?
Sure.
Thank you.
And I will figure out how to do that. Let's see. Let's start video first. That'll be a good start. And then we'll move it so that you're not having to look at my light. Okay. From beginning and share screen. There we go. And share. And now from beginning. Okay, are you now seeing?
I'm seeing your presentation. You're not in presentation mode quite yet.
But not in presentation mode?
Not in presentation mode, right?
Let's find, and I told you I had to explain this to Jamie. Let me just find, why is
If you go to from beginning, that's
there we go.
Now, if you go to display settings, Bill, if you
Yeah.
go to display settings at the top and then click, that's the one, there we go, perfect.
Okay, all righty. So my presentation is geared towards the role of the ministry and the Ministry of Skilled, or the role of Skilled Trades Ontario. So as Jamie mentioned, Skilled Trades Ontario was established 1 year ago on January 1st, 2022 as a Crown agency to replace the Ontario College of Trades. And in order to simplify and transform skilled trades and apprenticeship system in Ontario. So the process for the transition for Stowe is divided actually into 3 phases. The Stowe transition, which is what had occurred, planning for mature state, which is where we are right now, and then the implementation of the mature state in the future. So I won't dwell too much on this because we have talked a little bit, or Jamie talked a little bit about this already. The minister function under the new Building on Opportunities in the Skilled Trades Act. The minister is still responsible for prescribing trades, that is designating something as being a skilled trade, classifying trades as compulsory or non-compulsory, prescribing the scope of trade for scope of practice rather for trades, and then various other regulation making authorities such as the ratios and exemptions. And as I mentioned in one of the responses to the questions earlier, although the minister is responsible for these things, they will be done usually in consultation and possibly on the recommendation of Skilled Trades Ontario. And then Jamie has already covered off the ministry functions do include an oversight role with Stowe program design for funding programs and supports. And I know there was a question in the chat about what support programs are available. Those do still fall to the ministry. Administration of the funding programs and supports. At present, apprenticeship registration and issuance of certificates of apprenticeship. The administration of the exams themselves, and then the compliance and enforcement piece via the appointment of inspectors. And that is one of the things, one of the big changes from when the Ontario College of Trades existed, because they were responsible for compliance and enforcement under OCTA, the Ontario College of Trades and Apprenticeship Act, which is what preceded the BOSTA legislation. So here is where Jamie has already spoken to the STO functions, so I'll just proceed from that. So the second phase, which as I mentioned is currently in progress, includes planning for the mature state service delivery and the potential transition of MLI TSD service functions to STO, which should include apprenticeship registrations, the exam administration, and then certification at the apprenticeship level. Because as Jamie mentioned, STO is already responsible for certification at the journey person level. The planning phase does include the assessment of all ministry-led functions, options for the mature state service delivery model, and then the transition and operational planning. As part of this phase, there will be ongoing expansion of the functionality of the STO digital portal, which Jamie has already spoken about, which at present includes the apprenticeship applications, and then has recently, we've added the client and sponsor access to training standard information for specific trades, which means that the apprentices and the sponsors are able to go online and record the apprentice's progress and have sign-offs at the sponsor level of the parts that the apprentice has already completed. And then with regard to the implementation of the mature state, which I was told yesterday, maybe we shouldn't be saying 2025 so much as saying sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. But at the moment, it's projected it'll be sometime around 2025 is when it's expected that STO will reach mature state. So subject to the relevant legislative amendments, STO will assume responsibility for these pieces that the ministry currently handles. Registering training agreements between apprentices and sponsors, for the apprenticeship training, exam administration, including the scheduling, invigilation, and marking functions, which are currently carried out by the ministry, issuing the certificates of apprenticeship, as I mentioned earlier, receiving and responding to client service inquiries from prospective apprentices, existing apprentices, and sponsors, and then full public-facing apprenticeship services, including the ongoing development and maintenance of the STO portal. Because as Jamie mentioned, the STO portal is going to be a key to the whole apprenticeship process. And that is actually it for mine, and I will now take questions.
Okay. So I'm just going to have a look. Does anyone have any questions for Bill? Oh, Tamara, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I would have used the chat, but I broke my wrist and I can't type with a whatever. So I see there's quite a bit of emphasis, or it seems there's a lot of emphasis on this portal. So as far as public facing goes, is the expectation that everybody who wants to become an apprentice will have digital skills and be able to navigate a portal effectively? Or will there be other options for people who don't have that level of comfort with either digital skills, or they perhaps don't even possess the technology?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Sorry, Bill, I'm going to jump in because I just had this conversation with someone yesterday. Your point is extremely well taken. And I have relayed that message back. I mean, yes, the expectation is that the portal will be the go-to, but it is my sincere hope that it won't be the only avenue into the system. And again, your point is well taken and it has been relayed.
Yeah, the thing I will add is that this has been as we've moved to more electronic services, electronic applications, for example. There's been an apply online function to on the ministry website for many years now. We have always maintained that there has to also be a paper-based application process. There has to be an option for those who either don't have the connectivity, don't have the technical skills, as you mentioned, that kind of thing. So yes, there should always be an alternative that doesn't, so that people aren't being excluded because of their situation.
Thank you for that. I have a question from Sarah Gill. In this mature state, will there be SDO offices in many communities to support these services?
Well, we don't know. We're still waiting to hear about that. In the short to medium term, STO is hoping to acquire a physical location for a head office. Beyond that, we don't know what the future holds. I can certainly anticipate that's the case as Skilled Trades Ontario absorbs more program delivery services, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. Unless, Bill, you have other insider information that I don't, and I don't think you do.
No, I don't. Like at the moment, the ministry has, I think it's 25 field offices around the province that provide, apprenticeship services, and I think another 5 or so that deal with some of the other, also deal with, the other Employment Ontario programs, and that is independent of or that's in addition to the ones that I guess are satellite offices of some of our ones. So for example, I believe there's a Dryden office in Northwest Ontario, in addition to the Kenora and Thunder Bay offices that provide full apprenticeship services. So whether or not Stowe is going to adopt a similar model is something that will have to be determined, or how they fit together.
What incentives are available for employees to hire and sponsor first-year apprentices?
So we launched something called the Achievement Incentive about 2 years ago, I guess, and then made some enhancements to it about a year ago that do offer employers milestone pay or incentive payments at a milestone basis as apprentices that they're training do hit certain milestones. So if the employer is hiring an apprentice who fits into one of a couple of categories, either comes from an underrepresented group, and there are a number of different elements to what could constitute an underrepresented group, or the apprentice is a youth, so less than 25, then at that point, the employer can qualify for a $1,000 payment for that apprentice for having hired them. And if they fit into both of those categories, both youth and underrepresented, then the amount is $2,000. Then as the apprentice progresses through their training and finishes each level of schooling and eventually successfully completes their apprenticeship, there are $1,000 payments at each of those milestones. And then again, an additional amount of $1,000 per youth and per underrepresented group at each of those stages as well. So I used to know what the total was. I think if the person was a youth who was from an underrepresented group and managed to get through the whole apprenticeship and 3 levels of schooling, I believe the total amount they can qualify for is $14,000 over the course of that person's training. But the question was specifically about taking on new apprentices. So if the new apprentice fits one of those categories, youth or underrepresented group, then there are milestone payments available through Achievement Incentive.
Thank you. I have a question from Elaine, and then we'll go to Patricia. Elaine asks, will SDO be increasing the number of paper-based training standard logbooks they offer? Currently, only 9 trades are being mailed to new apprentices.
I'm afraid I don't know. I could look into that and report back, but I sadly don't have an answer for you.
Okay, thank you. Patricia has her hand up. Go ahead, Patricia, please.
Thank you, Sherry. So in my experience over the last 5 years or so, one of the biggest barriers is that number of 1-to-1. We've had a lot of journeymen who have left the trade. And then those employers that have taken my apprentices, even with financial incentives, are tapped out. So they cannot take any additional apprentices. I've had several that I have trained. The M&O ran a 4-year employment and energy, women in the trades, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And I've had to retrain several of those who went to school because they were not able to secure a sponsor. So if we're not increasing the number that employers can take, we're not doing anything but training and constantly training and retraining. That door, the revolving door, is still happening. So I don't see a way around that. We can give employers all the incentives they want, but if they still only have 2 journeymen and 2 apprentices right now, they're not taking anybody else. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's any, like, I know you guys said there wasn't plans to increase those numbers, but that problem is going to maintain itself for the duration of that apprenticeship.
Okay, so the only thing, and your point is well taken. The only thing I would say is that there are only, like, the BOSTA legislation, where it speaks to ratios, it does say that the ratio is 1-to-1 for those trades that have been prescribed as being subject to an apprenticeship to journey person ratio. So most of the trades do not have actually a specified ratio, and in those trades, what will happen is when the employer is looking to take on apprentices, additional apprentices beyond whatever number they already have, the employment and training consultant does have a little more latitude to look at what the training situation is. But where there is a specified ratio, 1-to-1, as Jamie said earlier, 1-to-1 is the ratio for those trades that are specified, and there are no plans at the moment that I'm aware of to modify that.
Okay, I have a question from, so go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just going to, not that it really addresses the ratio issue, but one thing that I know the ministry really focuses on, and Skilled Trades Ontario is also planning on focusing on, is the importance of making sure that apprentices who are in the system move through the system and complete and move on, so employers are able to take on a new apprentice. One problem that has always been, preventing new people from coming in is apprentices who come into the system and then just park themselves there, and for a whole variety of reasons don't move on. And so we're really aware that that's an issue that we want to, eliminate as much as possible, as to keep people moving through and coming out the other side of the apprenticeship system and making new spaces available. So that, is maybe a small part of the problem, but, definitely we're aware of that and want, to keep the system flowing.
A quick question here is, does the same ratio exist in every province? And I don't know if
No, not at all. I mean, there are some provinces have no ratios. It's different from province to province.
Okay, and one more question here, and then we'll move on. So, is there more in class? Are there more class spaces opening up to move apprentices on?
Okay. I'm not, so you're asking, are we increasing the number of spaces? So for the training delivery agents that are approved to deliver the in-class training, there are just over 80 of them, I guess, across the province, and some of them will deliver just a single trade. Some of them will, especially the colleges, will deliver quite a wide variety of trades. The purchase of apprenticeship classes has increased year over year. So where there is a capacity for a TDA to deliver more training, and where there is a demand for more classroom training for particular trades, we try to meet that demand. There isn't, so in that sense, yes, there are more class spaces opening up. We obviously we also work as much as possible to fill those classes so that there are not seats going to waste, as it were. But yeah, that's, I guess, and certainly, as I'm sure all of you can appreciate, during the pandemic, there was a real impediment to clients being able to go to school when either when the training delivery agents were shut down, or when there were physical distancing restrictions on how many people could gather in a classroom or gather in a lab, that kind of thing. But we have been working over the past year to try and catch up on what was missed. And I believe going forward, that is being addressed. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much, both Jamie and Bill, for your presentations and for your responses. Again, we will be making sure that the questions in the chat that didn't get addressed are answered, and we'll be sending that out with resources later in the month. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie Hobbs to introduce our case studies.
Hi, good day. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Steph.
Okay, that's great. Somebody muted me earlier. That's why I disappeared. We just wanted to give you some examples now, a few examples of how the upgrading provided by Literacy and Basic Skills services can support service providers, people on the apprenticeship goal path, and employers to help apprentices be more successful. We have two case studies where LBS has worked very closely with employers and occupational organizations. The first one I'd like to introduce first, Tamara Cottery, who's been the Executive Director of Literacy Link South Central since 1996. She has an honors degree in English and has further credentials in teaching English as a second language, adult education, editing, and evaluation. She is truly a lifelong learner. Tamara began her work in the literacy field as a tutor in a community-based agency. She recognizes the changing powers of literacy and education, and she is committed to building a dynamic and effective literacy system. Tamara will be speaking with their experiences with LA Union. Lisa Ambe is the Executive Director of the Rideau Ottawa Valley Learning Network, which is the support organization, LBS support organization for the City of Ottawa and the counties of Renfrew, Lanark, and Prescott-Russell. Since 2017, ROVLN has had a positive relationship with Landscape Ontario. In 2017, they conducted a research project with Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation that explores training as a means to bust stereotypes about the landscape profession and create a pipeline of interested candidates into this red seal trade. In 2022, Landscape Ontario approached the network to develop a prior learning toolkit to support apprentices along their training pathway to journey person. Over this time, the partnership between Landscape Ontario and ROVLN has evolved through a mutual understanding of the role that essential skills and skills for success, as they're now called, training has had to prepare individuals for working in landscaping, as well as supporting the ongoing demand for highly skilled individuals. And Lisa is going to speak with the experiences with Landscape Ontario. So I'm going to throw it open first to Tamara. And Tamara, you have the floor.
Thanks. I'm just gonna pull up my presentation. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, does everything look all right?
Looks great, Tamara.
Okay, I've lost my video thing, but I guess you guys don't really need to see me. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to see that so many people took time out of their schedule to participate in today's session. And I'm also super excited that there are so many people whose names I don't recognize. So this really does seem to be an opportunity today, this webinar, to explore systems, which you heard in my bio, I'm pretty interested in, and to look more specifically about at how adult upgrading programming can support the apprenticeship system. Okay. And it's also interesting, sorry, I made a lot of notes during the first two speakers, so I'm kind of ad-libbing a bit here, but it was very interesting to hear the conversation about barriers. You know, that certainly stigma is a barrier. We hear that a lot. But also navigation. I think I saw in the chat that people were saying many of us were drawn to today's conversation because we already have at least one foot in the apprenticeship game. And we still have so many questions. There's still so many things that we don't understand. And yet we are in a position often at the frontline level to try to guide other people. So I do see this navigation issue as being a potential barrier. But the one that I'm here to talk about today is where a lack of functional skill, ability, or credentials is also a challenge. And I think it was Jamie who mentioned that the ministry is interested in seeing more people complete their apprenticeship and perhaps achieve that status of journey person. We very much in adult upgrading or literacy and basic skills want to see that too. And that has really formed the impetus for why it's not just because we're part of Employment Ontario, employment services, apprenticeship, and adult literacy, all part of Employment Ontario. But we're very interested in seeing and exploring and documenting and sharing all the ways in which we have been working at the frontline level to achieve a better connection with apprenticeship and support learners. And in the background of all this is the hope that perhaps some of these things that are working locally can stop being like a local phenomenon and maybe be replicated in a more strategic way at the provincial level. So that's something that I think many people on this call today have been striving for and would like to see come to fruition. Okay, so let's talk about LIUNA. Not everybody perhaps is familiar with what LIUNA is. The Laborers International Union of North America. So I said in the beginning, there was no connection between ourselves and apprenticeship, not in any real sense. But we did know, because we had a lot of messaging from the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, that it was expected that we get to know our sort of sister programs, employment services as well as apprenticeship, and that we begin to explore what our areas of commonality were. So we were very fortunate in that in our community here in London, we've done a lot of professional development as an adult literacy network, but our budgets are pretty low. We don't have a lot of money, so we're always looking for free community space. So that's what first brought us into contact with LIUNA, because they had this amazing community space that they let nonprofits like us use for free. So we kind of, took full advantage of that free space. And through over time, I guess, we developed a relationship. We were having conversations about what exactly they did, what did we do, and started to explore some of those areas of interest. And one of the things that we did is we approached LIUNA's training director and invited him to be a director on our board. So I would say that's kind of the genesis, if you will, of this particular relationship. So we were very, very pleased. Even though the training director was on our board for a number of years, it took a few years for us to really get specific about how we could work together. So fortunately, the ministry, in its pre-apprenticeship call for proposals, actually identified that it would be nice if pre-apprenticeship applicants would look at developing a partnership with a local adult literacy network or agency. Okay, so presumably they also noticed that skills development, skills identification, skills improvement might be a part of pre-apprenticeship. So they encouraged us to explore that partnership, and that's exactly what we did with LiUNA. So what we decided to do was, first of all, review their intake process as they were bringing in people and interviewing them to be potential pre-apprentices. We looked at the process that they were using to do that and provided some suggestions for modifications. And then we talked about the fact that so many people, they may have a certain level of educational attainment, but they may not have a level of skill that corresponds to that. Now, in LiUNA's case, you need a grade 10, right? So they had people who were applying who said, yeah, we've got a grade 10, I have a grade 10. But then as they progressed through the pre-apprenticeship program, it was discovered that they didn't have a grade 10. They spent some time in grade 10 when they were younger, but maybe they only had 7 credits, right? So there were a couple of issues that were on LiUNA's radar. They knew that they had some folks who had some weak foundational skills, primarily in the area of math, but they also knew that they had individuals who didn't have the necessary academic credentials to actually sign on as an apprentice. And some of these individuals were from, they were educated outside of Ontario or even outside of Canada. So there was also an issue with credential recognition, right? So as we talked earlier, navigating systems, even though they're there, is not always easy. So this could be another place where people kind of give up, right? It's like, oh, now I have to get my credentials recognized. I don't know how to do that. I don't understand the process. And they just frankly give up. So what we decided to do was introduce something called a skills check-in. So for every pre-apprentice that was coming into LiUNA in that particular year, which I think was 2 or 3 years ago, we decided that we were going to meet one-on-one with them. So an adult educator was going to sit down with these pre-apprentices and talk about their educational history. We're going to talk about, their experiences in school, what they liked, what they didn't like, how comfortable they were with reading and writing, math. We also talked about soft skills. So it was really interesting to me that Jamie referred to soft skills in her presentation as something that is increasingly on employers' radar, right? Technical skills are a huge part of apprenticeship, but they're not the only part. But there's a considerable emphasis put on technical skills, not surprisingly, but maybe not so much on soft skills, right? So we wanted to start that conversation with the pre-apprentices. Also talk to them about digital literacy. So I asked a question about this earlier, but we started this relationship with LiUNA during the pandemic. So any kind of programming that was going to be recommended to pre-apprentices to improve their skills had to be done online. That was a problem for some of the pre-apprentices. Some of them didn't own a computer. So we were able to work with LiUNA to identify people who might need to borrow a laptop in order to participate in programming. We also talked to pre-apprentices about previous learning supports that they may have accessed, right? So when they were in school, were they ever identified as having an IEP, an individualized education plan? Attention deficit came up a lot, ADHD came up a lot. Some people disclosed other challenges that they had experienced. Maybe they needed more time to take tests, they needed a quiet place. They spent time in the resource room. So, the reason why we ask these questions is not, not because we're just trying to satisfy our own curiosity, but because we're thinking about what the future holds for those pre-apprentices and the time that they're going to spend in school, right? And eventually they're going to sit down and write an exam. And what kind of accommodations did they need in the past that they may need to continue advocating for themselves to have in the future? So that first year with LiUNA, we did 75 or so skills check-ins, and we did them with everybody. Because that was another question we had. Well, how do you know who really might have skills challenges? You can have somebody who has a grade 12, but is functioning at a grade 6 level. You can have somebody who thinks they have grade 10, but they don't. Right? So the decision was made to make it uniform. It was a 45-minute conversation. and every single pre-apprentice would do it. And it was really amazing for us that some of the people that we sat down with, yeah, they had high levels of skill. They were university educated, but every conversation yielded something. And one of the coolest things for me was when we think about the stigma, right? I was looking at most of these are young men, the pre-apprentices that we saw, and I couldn't help but think you could do anything you wanted to, you know, with your get up and go and your intelligence and your, you know, educational past, and they wanted to do a trade at LiUNA. So I thought that was pretty cool and something that we have tried to highlight. Okay, so we didn't just do the skills check-ins. As I said, math was identified as an issue by LiUNA before we ever sat down to have one-on-one skills check-ins with people. So we found that quite a number, and I'll say over half of the incoming pre-apprentices, they struggled with a pretty basic math diagnostic, right? So we're talking about adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, conversion, some questions about, you know, area and perimeter, things that are very much skills that you would need if you were going to be a part of the union at LiUNA and involved in construction work. So there were enough people who struggled that we thought, well, I think there's a program needs to be developed here to support people, because we're not just about identifying issues and skills challenges, we're trying to also figure out some solutions. So we were very grateful that Fanshawe College here in London, their adult upgrading program, they took this on and they developed a math booster. And the math booster they developed specifically for LiUNA, right? So it wasn't an off-the-shelf kind of intervention. It was a situation where Fanshawe staff met with LiUNA instructors and staff, and they talked about what kinds of math were really important for success at LiUNA. And so they developed the program. It was 2 nights a week times 4 weeks. So you can imagine these folks are in class like from say 7 till 2, I'm guessing. I get a little fuzzy about some of the details. And then they were asked to participate in a math booster. And some of them were coming from out of town, like when the pandemic allowed for in-person training, but there was really, really good uptake on this program. A lot of people, because of how it had been pitched, right? Because of how solid LiUNA was, I think, in their messaging, they were very clear that skills development is important. You have to be skilled to be a good member of LiUNA, and that was an expectation that they had. And I think that really increased the uptake beyond what would have happened if an adult upgrading program had tried to, you know, promote a program itself without that solid support from LiUNA. So again, we were very, very thankful that our local program ran this. I think they ran it, that first year, I want to say 3 times. So it was pretty awesome. And the relationship has grown from there. The next year, when LiUNA applied for pre-apprenticeship funding, they put in to have 120 pre-apprentices. So I think it was almost double the previous year. And Fanshawe continued to revise the math booster. It wasn't a one and done. You know, they were learning about, you know, getting feedback from students, getting feedback from instructors. So they revised the math booster. And it was pretty clear that there would be more opportunities in the future. So because of our really positive relationship with LiUNA, and because we are part of a provincial network of adult literacy providers, we started hearing about other parts of the province that were working with their local LiUNA chapters. And we thought, well, maybe it would be good to do a case study. You know, obviously there's more going on than just what we're doing here in London. So the case study, you can see a picture of it there. We did find 2 other LiUNA locals that were actively working with local upgrading programs to do different kinds of work, which was really awesome. And then we pulled together, or invited rather, LiUNA locals from across the province to share some of what we had been doing and some of what these other groups had been doing. And we found that a couple of other locals were interested, the one from Toronto and the one from Windsor. And so we were able to facilitate a relationship between the adult upgrading programs in their area and those other LiUNA locals. which was, really exciting for us. Still a lot of emphasis on math for sure, but there was also interest in communication, in the development of soft skills, and in enhancing digital literacy skills. So recently, we've begun to explore with LIUNA the idea of working with more than just pre-apprentices. With pre-apprenticeship, we absolutely want to start talking about skills and the importance of skills at the beginning of a person's journey into apprenticeship. We don't want people moving in to take their in-school sessions and failing them, or potentially failing them repeatedly. I'm not saying that's the norm, but I'm saying that it absolutely does happen. So when you think about people who are not completing, a lack of skills or a lack of comfort in demonstrating skills in an academic environment is certainly one of the potential issues. But this year, I think Stephanie mentioned skills for success. So there is an opportunity for adult literacy providers to put in for some pilot proposals to do some new and different work. And in continued conversations with LIUNA, they have a lot of current apprentices, not apprentices, a lot of current members that they would like to see further supported in terms of skills development. So they identified that they have people who are working in precarious employment situations, people who may not have the foundational skills to understand the collective agreements that are supporting them, or the health and safety that is there to support them. And some individuals are amazing. They've been working on the job for a long time, but they don't have perhaps the soft skills that they need to move into a more supervisory position. So we're very excited to be able to, well, we're putting in the proposal, we'll see if it gets funded, but it would be really great to look and see if we can make a difference with another group of people who are associated with LIUNA. And I think I'm going to close this out really by talking about what I call the ripple effect. So, we started off our relationship with LIUNA with the skills check-ins for apprentices. We're going to be working with a couple of other training delivery agents through the pre-apprenticeship program next year, because we connected with them in November. We said, hey, we've got some good working relationships with another local. And we think that we could bring something similar to you. And the really cool thing about this is that they budget in their pre-apprenticeship application for the support that we can bring to the table. Right? I mean, a lot of adult literacy agencies have been dealing with status quo funding for a long time. So they're a little constrained in their ability to go out and form these relationships. But by LIUNA building in those costs, and these other training delivery agents building in those costs through pre-apprenticeship, we're able to provide that support to the apprenticeship system, which is pretty awesome. And last but not least, we have been supporting LIUNA by helping pre-apprentices take steps that they need to complete their entrance requirements. So oftentimes, like, we meet with people, we do that one-on-one check-in, and we notice that people need to take some steps to improve their foundational skills, or to get those credits that they need to have the grade 10 or have their credentials recognized, but life happens, right? Sometimes it falls to the bottom of the to-do pile, and 6 months later, we get often a panicked call from these individuals saying, oh my gosh, I need to now do this. And we're here as a referral network. We help them get connected to the agencies that can provide them with the support that they need. And, I feel like LIUNA really, really appreciates this help, because they say we're really, really good at what we do. We provide technical training. But for our members and our pre-apprentices who need that upgrading support, we don't always know where to send them. They have difficulty navigating the educational sector the same way that I feel I have difficulty navigating apprenticeship. So it becomes a situation where we're good at what we do, they're good at what they do, and we can combine our talents to really support apprentices and pre-apprentices. Okay, I probably took more than my fair share of time, but that's the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tamara. Are there any questions for Tamara?
Well, I just noticed in the chat that apparently Liuna is pronounced Liuna. I'm going to have a conversation with our training director and see why he never corrected me on that. But thank you, Cora.
Good. Okay, well, has Lisa joined us yet, Sherry?
Yes, she has.
Okay, I just see Annalisa has not a question, but just a comment. It's so very interesting and wonderful to see the resulting programming. I agree. So we'll now proceed with Lisa. Welcome, Lisa, who's been able to join us. And I will turn it over to you.
Hi, I just want to make sure that you're seeing the actual presentation and not the presenter's view.
Yeah, Lisa,
Yeah.
if you can see the tab on the top that says display settings in the middle, pull that down.
Okay.
There you go, right there.
So now you're seeing the.
Now we're seeing your presentation. Yes, thank you.
Super duper. Okay, I'm glad you said that because I did go through one time presenting with my presenter's view. Had no idea. No one told me. Okay. So I'm here today and I am graciously using Landscape Ontario's slide deck to talk to you about collaborative partnerships in the horticultural sector. And my name is Lisa Umbai, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rideau Ottawa Valley Learning Network. And of course, we promote and strengthen adult training programs. And in our network, there are 15 distinct literacy and basic skills providers that have 22 locations, and some of whom have participated in the projects with Landscape Ontario. So I'm just going to talk about introduction to landscaping profession and training and programs and the workforce development that they do, and then talk about the 2 case studies and question and answers. So just to let you know that there are 9 chapters of Landscape Ontario in Ontario itself, and with 2,600 companies and over 70,000 full-time employees. And it's the largest voluntary horticultural trades association in Canada, and a whole bunch of other good stuff. Some of the misconceptions that we all think about is that it's low pay, it's not a career, it's for big burly men, that it's unskilled, seasonal and summer jobs. And one of the projects that we did, the case study, was to combat these stereotypes or these misconceptions. The truth of it is that it really has an impact on climate change. So I love how Sally Harvey, who is the Director of Education and Workforce Development, used to describe it as they're sort of the front line of supporting climate change on a very local and municipal level, that they build strong communities and have a quality work-life balance, and they also have lifelong careers. And just to let you know, in terms of like what Landscape Ontario is combating right now, certainly climate change, but also the fact that there are a number of retirements that are happening, and that they have projected about 60,000 labor shortages in landscaping. So they're looking to fill this through a really innovative apprenticeship program that they have, and the incredible supports that they have for apprentices to ensure that they complete and actually go on to become journeymen. And a couple of things that they are doing is looking at innovation, innovative ways of creating like a funnel into landscape. And one of them, as you can see, is adult learners. And they have a number of different other programs that they're running as well. So one of the ones I'd like to talk about is this pre-apprenticeship, pre-employment training program that we called Ready, Set, Grow. And it was funded by the Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation. So if you think back to 2018, there was the call for proposals, and there were demand-led, there were different skills programs, and there was a couple that were geared towards LBS. So we applied through the demand-led stream, and we were successful because we had a great partnership with Landscape Ontario and Rovlin, which was sort of the lead on this project. And then we had Workforce Development Board as well. So here are the different partnerships that were involved in this particular project. So you can see Pinecrest Queensway was an employment services. They did the placements. The YMCA also did placements and employment services. And we had the Ottawa Catholic School Board that was involved from the LBS side. And so what we did for this project was we had the contextualized and technical skills sessions. We used the LEO curricula for groundskeeping and modified it by adding in some more contemporary landscaping pieces, such as irrigation and building up things. People got an opportunity to do some on-site job tasting. So we had them out really quite early, cleaning up flower beds and different things with use of different tools. The instructor was a landscaping and architect, actually. So he came from the field and was really great in building up the expertise of each of the participants. And they did some calisthenics every day to build up their muscles to be able to hold on to those equipments using cutters and trimmers and things. They did yoga, and then they would go out and actually do some hands-on work and working with soil. We had them building, and I'll show you some photographs as well. We were featured on CBC with an interview about this innovative program. That's one of the learners. So we actually had them going out and to garden centers and doing their on-placement in nurseries and actual horticultural and landscaping organizations. And we had them build planters. So we, in partnership with the Ottawa Tool Library, they built cedar planters and got that skill. And then they were out working in the grounds and doing quite a bit of like work, as you can see the equipment over here. And that was that case study. And it was successful. We haven't run it again, but what happened is that it developed a really long-standing relationship with Landscape Ontario, and they actually use the model to work with other groups in different parts of Ontario, and they're calling it the GROW program. So they modified it a little bit. The next case study is that they came back to us this or last fiscal and wanted to support apprentices in a different way. So this is the case study about the prior to school toolkit. And the problem was that the Director of Education and Workforce Development was actually attempting to support apprentices with individualized resources, and also off the side of her desk, you know, after a full day's work, was helping people to get through their standard of qualification, and really found that the situation was unsustainable. When it came to particular individuals who had IEPs in their high school life, or even, you know, throughout their school career, they were putting really specific needs on the director that she was looking for supports to really help them be successful. People who had learning disabilities, others were adults that came back from a career and wanted to pursue a career in landscaping, and then were specifically having needs that the director wanted to address, but didn't have really the knowledge and skills. And the first thing that came to her mind was, you know, here is the LBS. We've already had a great relationship with them, so let's see what LBS can do for us. So they had this idea about a toolkit, and they approached us with their brainstorming, and so we set up a contract, and the Literacy Link South Central was part of this, as well as a contractor who helped to build the actual toolkit. And they we're going through a number of different considerations. You know, what would the cost be? How would we brand the materials? How would apprentices find the materials? Who do the work? And how would the efficacy be tested? And so what it came up with these broad categories, so really close to what Landscape Ontario had in their minds, with a couple of modifications like interpersonal and employability skills. There was, of course, their mathematics that is necessary for grading and percentages. And then they had the idea about plant identification. That was one area where people struggled. And then foundational skills. So these categories then break into specific actual tasks, which is phenomenal, and break it down into different things that people can participate in. And the feedback has been phenomenal. Just recently, we found out that over 300 people have viewed the toolkit, and that between 10 to 20 people have gone through all of the modules, and that most users were people who were nervous to start school, but a significant portion are people who have started school and their teacher recommended the modules to strengthen their skills. And then most recently, we had just had a meeting with Landscape Ontario that they're interested in re-engaging literacy to develop digital literacy skills. So that module is in the making, and we just had a preliminary meeting. So you can see what kind of trust is built between the contractor and Literacy Link South Central, and of course Rovelin for helping to support this, is that they've come back to us with other ideas. Any questions? How did you, Sherry?
Just checking in, anyone who has questions, please either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and Lisa will respond. There is a note in the chat here from Tamara saying that they did a couple of focus groups with apprentices who had struggled or were struggling as well.
Excellent.
So does anyone have questions for Lisa? Okay, just a second. Judy from Barrie Literacy says, thanks, Lisa. Great job with all aspects.
Oh, good.
Just give everyone a second in case they have questions.
So one of the things that I guess we're noticing is that with Landscape Ontario, the Sally Harvey, who was the first person that I met with back in 2017, has left Landscape Ontario for another career, but the relationship, you know, is specific to the knowledge that the person has. So it's the more you keep up with the relationship, the better, I think. So I have to reach out to the current person who is holding that position and make sure that that we stay in good contact to keep the relationship developing and fostering good relationship.
Excellent. I have a question from Jim Tizik. Wants to know if he can have access to the material used.
Which material? Like the landscape, the curricula?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Well,
All
if you
right.
have any questions moving forward, please put them in the chat, and we can certainly, again, we will be sharing the chat and trying to answer questions that arise there. So we'll move on. This morning, we are very pleased to have Tom Zizis here to speak to us about the labor market in Ontario and apprenticeship. Tom is a labor market analyst and a workforce development specialist. And for the last 15 years, he has undertaken numerous assignments on behalf of workforce planning boards, local governments, community colleges, and employment service providers to investigate and propose solutions for labor market challenges of various communities across Ontario. He has written extensively on the changing labor market and its impact on income inequality and on the need for labor market interventions to be demand-focused and evidence-based. So Tom, please carry on.
Okay, thank you very much, Sherry. I'm going to call up my slides. The data that I'm going to be sharing, most of it comes from the Employment Ontario, the Employment Ontario client data. I'm just wanting to make sure I'm getting at the right.
Yeah, you need to go to slideshow, Tom.
Yeah, I know, and I've got the I've got the bar. Sorry, I've just got the bar blocking my ability to click on it.
There you
There
go.
we go. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
We're good. All right. So Employment Ontario client data that's shared with the workforce planning boards across the province is one major source, and the other source is from Statistics Canada. They collect all the apprenticeship registration data from across Canada, then they make it available annually. So I'm sure some of this has been covered, but so very briefly, just to provide the parameters of this. So there are 144 skilled trades in Ontario. There are 23 that are compulsory, and the rest are voluntary. So compulsory trades means that you cannot practice in that field unless you are you have a certificate as a journey person. 89 of these trades have a written exam. But what's significant, even when we have 144 skilled trades, there's actually a small number of trades that make up the vast majority of skilled trade persons. And I'm going to share some data about that in a moment. We typically cluster these different skilled trades into 4 categories: construction, such as carpenters and plumbers; industrials, that's typically involved in the manufacturing sector, so machinists and millwrights; motive power, so that's movement, so technicians who are working on the automotive service or other vehicles, technicians; and then the service sector broadly, so like hairdressers and chefs and cooks. So let me just mention one thing about compulsory versus voluntary. So a plumber, for example, is a compulsory trade. So we can expect that virtually everyone who's working as a plumber is actually certified. Let's acknowledge that there are some people who may be doing this in an unregulated way, but it's a very, very, very small proportion. Carpenters, on the other hand, are a voluntary trade. And in other work I did back a couple of years ago, we tried to estimate the proportion of workers in a category that was voluntary compared to the number of people who are working in that occupation. So this is around 2018, 2019. I don't think the figures have changed very much. We did it for a couple of areas in Toronto. We did it like for York region and for Peel region and a few other areas. And by and large, so carpenters, I'd say, if I've had to make an estimate, maybe 10 to 15% of carpenters are registered journey persons. Okay? The rest are not. And so it's important to kind of be aware of that. So when we're talking about these occupations, we have many people who are not have gone through the apprenticeship process. Similarly with cooks. Cooks is the trade is a voluntary trade, and they're a much smaller proportion. I'd say it'd be around 2 to 5% of cooks are journey persons. On the other hand, hairdressers are a mandatory trade, and so virtually all of them, or a large portion of them, will be certified. So let's talk about registration. We keep talking, the province has made a push to increase registrations in the province. So these are the numbers from the fiscal year 2016-17 to the most recent data for 2021-2022. So you can see in those first few years, kind of there was a slow increase in the number of registrations. So the various promotional campaigns that everyone's been undertaking increased the numbers. Of course, that big dip going down to 16,730 in 2021 was because of COVID, right? And the rebound has not, in the last year, has not brought us back to where we were before COVID. But this is not unique to apprenticeship. If we were to look at the data for employment services, for literacy and basic skills, for most of the other programs under Employment Ontario, it's the same pattern. A trend before COVID, big drop especially in 2021, and then that the first year of recovery has not brought us back to the previous year. At the bottom, I'm showing the proportions according to the 4 regional categories that the province uses for Employment Ontario: Central Region, Eastern Region, Northern and Western. So that's the kind of split in terms of the proportion of new registrations in apprenticeship programs for 2021, 2022. Okay. Now, these are, I wanted to highlight kind of what are the major registration categories, the skilled trades that receive the largest number of registrations. And this is for 2021, 2022. I'll draw your attention to the column on the extreme right, first of all. So that shows the Ontario figures. So number 1, electricians; number 2, automotive service technicians, plumbers, general carpenters, truck and coach technicians, and hairstylists. The top 6, okay? And I've color coded it so you can look at the various regions to see where those figures, how they play out. And you can see that in almost every region, these are the top 6, or at least the top 5. There's only 2 categories, those that are colored white, that actually break this top 6 grouping. And these top 6 make up, in Ontario, 58% of all registrations. Remember, we have 144 trades, but 6 of them already account for 58%. And I think if we included the top 20, we'd probably get up to over 80% in terms of registration. So a lot of these trades among those 144 actually have very small number of registrations, and several of them have very large number of registrations. And it's just the order in which these numbers, these top 6 occur in the 4 different regions. Obviously, electricians are number 1 in all across all 4 regions. Then you can see automotive service technicians is number 2 in most regions, but you can see kind of the pattern. Now, I just want to compare that to around 5 years ago, the new registrations. And by and large, the only difference, first of all, we have the same top 6. Electricians and automotive service technicians are number 1 and 2, but here we see hairstylists is number 3. Okay, I'm just going to go back to 2021. So hairstylist is number 6 now. So it was number 3 before, and since then plumbers have come up in numbers, and general carpenters and truck and coach technicians. And the same phenomena that these top 6 still represent, over 50% of all the registrations. Okay, let me move on to breakdown by age. And now this is in terms of people who work in these occupations. So I just wanted to get a kind of a representative sample. This is census data, so it's not data from those who are registered as journey persons. It's the age proportions of individuals working in these occupations, whether they have a journey person certification or not. Most of these are mandatory trades. So, and what I've done is I've shown here is the percentage of people who are employed in this category who are 55 years or over. And on the left, I'm showing for all occupations. So for all workers in Ontario, you can see, we've had this trend. The blue line is 2011, the orange line is 2016, the gray line is 2021. We have an increasing proportion of our workforce is 55 years and older. It's interesting that for the most part, in many trades, actually, that older population is not the same proportion in terms of the total number of workers in the categories. To some measure, it has to do with some of these trades are just kind of wear you down physically. All right. So once you get to over 55 years and over, it's not so easy always to get under a car to do repairs or to do climbing and bending and so on. So so there tends to be a higher rate of earlier retirement or people who move on to supervisory roles or management roles and so on. But it is interesting. I think you can see that the real outlier is among hairstylists and barbers, which is it's a single category in terms of our occupational classifications. Much higher proportion, even compared to the general workforce of individuals who are 55 years and over. Okay, and to some extent, at the other end, we see automotive service technicians also slightly higher proportion. In both cases, over 20% of the workforce is over 55 years. Looking at the other age extreme in terms of younger people, and here I've chosen not 15 to 24-year-olds because many people who enter the trades are already in their late 20s. So looking at 15 to 34-year-olds, you can see in terms of all occupations on the left-hand side, we have just a slight increase in the proportion of younger people in that age category in the workforce. But in many of the trades, actually, those proportions have been increasing. And what that's telling us is, in fact, again, going back to, kind of the push in the last 10 years or so to promote the trades is having some impact because we have a higher proportion of individuals in those age brackets. That's especially the case among electricians and plumbers and heating and air conditioning mechanics. On the other hand, again, going back to hairstylists and barbers, wow, a real fall off in the proportion of younger people who are entering that occupation. And so the last slide is I'm going to show you the kind of middle category of workers who are 35 to 54 years old. I mean, we can almost call that kind of the core working age, right? Again, it's a smaller proportion of the entire workforce because we had this big baby boom generation, right? That has really distorted the profile, the demographic profile of our workforce, so that the category, the generation that follows the baby boom generation is kind of proportionately smaller. But what's really striking here is visually you can see in most of these trades what a fall off there is in the proportion of those who are 35 to 54 years old. And this is what the big kind of, when people talk about the skills shortages, the skilled trades shortages, it's about this generation, right? We had a moment 20, 30 years ago where we fell off in terms of the proportion of individuals who are entering apprenticeship programs. And when employers now say that there's a skills shortage, it's not that there aren't new apprentices coming in. What they're talking about is that there's a skill shortage among experienced workers, people who have 5, 10, 15 years. And this is that category. This is the 35 to 54-year-olds. And so that's why they're poaching from each other. They're, in the manufacturing sector, they're luring employees from competitors to work for them because the whole pool of people in these categories is smaller. Okay. Let me talk about moving from age to gender. So we know it's generally known how we have a smaller proportion of women who are in the skilled trades, and across the board. And here I'm comparing. First of all, the top row is the figures for 2016, 2017 in terms of new apprenticeship registration. Females made up 17% of apprenticeship registration. And it was the same in all areas. It's more or less the same in that it's equal across all areas, but it's dropped from down to now between 12 and 14% in 2021 and 2022. One of the reasons for that is I'm going to show is that it's not as if the proportion of females in the trades is equal if you look at any given trade. There's actually a huge variety in the proportion of females. So what I did is I kind of just picked out from the data a number of categories that showed varying proportions of females in the trades. So at the top, we have a whole bunch of trades where females make up only 0 to 5% of the apprenticeship certifications, okay? All this automotive service, so automotive service technicians, truck and coach technicians, auto body repairers are in this category. Carpenters, electricians, heavy duty equipment mechanics, heavy equipment and crane operators. You can see the list, but all of them are kind of the very traditional construction and manufacturing and automotive service trades, okay? So in these categories, females make up 0 to 5% of individuals getting certified. There's another category, make up slightly more, 5 to 10%. So machinists, so that's in the manufacturing sector, welders, and construction workers, others. So that typically means kind of people who are working somewhat as construction laborers or craft construction workers is the designation in Ontario. These labels, I have to tell you, are the ones that are used nationally, so they're not always the same ones that we use specifically in Ontario. 10 to 20%, landscape and horticultural technicians and specialists, stationary engineers, and power plant operators. Then you jump up. The various food service trades, almost half of them are female. So we're talking about cooks and chefs and so on. And then you've got a couple of trades that are not only majority, but almost the vast majority are female. So the main ones are early childhood educators and assistants, community and social service workers, and hairstylists and estheticians. And we saw the drop in hairdressers in terms of number of registrations. Remember, in 2016-17, they were third in terms of the number of registrations in the province, and around 5 years later, they were sixth. So just that drop, because there's so many females in that category, brings down the overall proportion of women in the trades, okay? So we talk a lot about trying to get women into all these other trades where they make up 0 to 5%. We're not making that much headway because partly it's just more challenging, you know, for a female to enter into a workplace where it's almost exclusively male. So there's a lot of work to be done in that category. But in terms of the numbers that are showing you, this kind of explains what those proportions mean. And partly, again, on this issue, we've got an interesting set of statistics around tracking the income of individuals who are in these occupations. Okay. Now, this is an interesting set of data from Statistics Canada. So at the point of certification, they have the income, but they also have the income of those individuals 2 years before they got certified as a journey person and 4 years before, as well as 2 years after. So we can see kind of the progression of what it means to enter as an apprentice, get your certification after, you know, whatever number of years. Programs are typically 2 to 4 years. Some are, I think there are a few where there are 5 years, and then 2 years after. Well, you can see the kind of pretty good rise in income in most of these categories, except hairstylists and barbers. I mean, if you wanted to have a good reason for why people may not want to go into that profession, this is the median income, annual income of individuals in those occupations.
Tom, Stephanie has her hand up about this slide.
Sure.
Hi, Tom. I'm just actually referencing a question that was put in the chat. which actually asked, would some of the reduction in hairstylists and barbers be due to the difference in wage from this restricted trade versus other restricted trades? And I think that kind of answers that question.
Yeah, it's, that's, like the picture tells the story, doesn't it? It's just, it's not only the relative difference in the wages, but it's also just the trend line. It's relatively flat, compared to the trend income growth in the other categories. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is I'm going to have to explain this because there's a lot of data here, but let's look at the top left corner. So we have automotive service technician. What this is illustrating is for the program length. So in the case of automotive service technician, it's a 4-year apprenticeship program. At the end of the 4 years, what's the status of that apprentice? Okay, so at program length. So it's a 4-year program, 22% of them have got certified. 41% are still continuing. So they're taking longer because they might have taken some, they might have had to delay getting some of their classroom training, or there's been some other interruption. And there's also 37%, so over a third have discontinued. They've dropped out of the program, okay? And then for those who are continuing, that 41% who are continuing, we have another set of data that what's their status at 1.5 times the program length. So if this program length is 4 years, it means what's their status at 6 years of those who are continuing. So there, a larger portion still get certified. A small portion are still continuing. 17% of those who are continuing, and 45% have dropped out. Okay, so all of which is to say, and this is not untypical of a trade, is that for various reasons people may run into, first of all, will take longer than what is the certification period, right? So if this is a 4-year program, only 22% were able to get themselves certified within those 4 years. And there's a portion that drop out. Now, some of the dropout may be, and I'll give you the example of carpenters further down, right? The figures are relatively similar to the auto service technician. You've got 20% who got certified compared to 20 after 4 years compared to 22 for automotive service. Almost the same proportion continued and around the same proportion discontinued. But I do know in the case of carpenters that after around a couple of years, they're finding that, this is again what we're hearing from the field, is that by and large, in terms of the work that they may be doing, maybe they're working in renovation work, or they're working in cottage country, they're building, decks and doing cottage repairs. They've actually have acquired enough of the skill set for them to operate and get gainful employment. They don't necessarily need the certification. It's a voluntary trade. If they've got the work and they're getting the experience, their pay pretty well, it stays the same whether they get certification or not. So in some trades, you will have higher levels of discontinuation, not because people are running into barriers, although that may be the case for some, but just from an economic perspective, they find they do just as well whether they get certified or not. Okay, but it's different for each trade, and so this kind of data is useful in order to understand the dynamics of any particular apprenticeship program. So we go to the top right, hairstylists and barbers. Here, the program length is 2 years. A higher portion finish it within 2 years, 37%. A large portion still continue. A very small proportion drop out, only 10% dropped out. At 1.5 program length, so at the 3-year mark in the case of hairstylists and barbers, a good chunk of them do finish by that time. Of those who continued, half of them, 51%, finished. A good portion are still continuing, and only, again, a smaller portion discontinued. We have the flip side when it comes to landscape horticulturists. Here it's a four-year program at program length. So 4 years after the program, after they start, only 10% have certified and 50% have discontinued. So, I don't have the explanations for each of them about what the dynamics are, but, for those who might be advising individuals about different programs and so on, it's important to know just that there are completely different dynamics with these different skilled trades about, how many people finish within the program length time, how many discontinue, how many take a longer time to achieve their certification. Okay. I'm going to just spend a bit of time talking, I guess a little policy piece here. So this is not data, but that back in 2019, the province asked the various workforce planning boards to conduct a study focusing on employers about what their views were of the apprenticeship system. And they had a series of questions they wanted to ask, and there were reports made to the ministry. As a consultant, I did the task for 3 workforce planning boards, and I also assisted 2 others. And they were in all different areas. A couple were in Northern Ontario, some were in, there was Simcoe and Muskoka, and there was also Peel and Halton and York region. So I got a real bird's eye view of what the employers were saying about the apprenticeship system. And what was remarkable was that they were all saying the same thing. It didn't matter whether you were in an urban setting or in a remote or a rural setting. I'm not going to go through all of these. This is a slide I took from a presentation I did in York region. But, the basic thing was, you got to promote the trades more, and you got to start with youth at the earliest stage when they're at high school or sooner. So people were saying we got to start in elementary school. We want to attract more, and we have been doing a better job attracting, but we have to promote the technical skills more in the high schools. We need to show that trades are not simply kind of manual labor and difficult, but a lot of it now that also involves digital skills. We need to show that the incomes that these individuals are getting. We've got to convince parents and guidance counselors, and there's a whole set of other issues. As I said, but these were like very common among all the participants in the trades, including we should be recruiting more skilled trades people from overseas. We got to do more to promote trades with women, and so on. These were the comments that were made in York region, and I put up the slides of what were the themes from other regions, because it was just a kind of mix and match. In some areas you'd have comments where they're saying, well, we need more help for small businesses in some places. We find some of our apprentices may have more difficulty with the written exams, but if we're talking about technical skills, we should do more testing of hands-on skills as opposed to doing it by way of written exams. Interesting from the previous case studies that people were profiling today, employers are saying, can you please include more soft skill training? It's not just the technical skills, and so on. But as I said, for each of the workforce planning boards produce reports, and those are available for those who want to delve deeper into these themes. One other thing, just before I finish, because we were doing surveys as part of these studies, we asked employers. We would say, okay, what trades are you hiring for? So they would name the trade in a survey. And then we were able to create branches of questions that if we knew it was a compulsory trade, we would ask the employer, do you know whether this is a compulsory trade or not? Or do you know if if it was a voluntary trade, would say, do you know if it was a voluntary trade? And so even employers who are hiring in these fields, okay, if it was a compulsory trade, if they're hiring plumbers, this first one example is from Peel Halton, but the second one below is from York. So like 3/4 of employers, 76%, said, yes, it's a compulsory trade. Well, I suppose that's good, but it's remarkable that around 1/4 of the employers who are hiring people in a compulsory trade category did not know that it was a compulsory trade. And in terms of voluntary trades, it was even worse, that they even a large portion of them actually thought the voluntary trade they were hiring for was in fact, they thought it was a compulsory trade. Here we have like over 40% in both categories thought. So, you know, for those of us who may not be that familiar with the skilled trades category, and we're, you know, unclear about what's a compulsory trade, what's a voluntary trade, it's striking that the employers themselves who are in these fields hiring these people didn't necessarily know the difference. Okay, I can give more information about where this data comes from for those who want to dig deeper. You know, I know these slides are going to be available for individuals, so just to know in terms of the EO client data and the data that's available on StatsCan, I just gave the different categories of analysis and that the data provides. Okay, so I wanted to make sure we have some time for questions. So I'm going to stop there and let me know what might be of interest or what questions people may have. I'm going to do the stop share right now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom, for your presentation. It was excellent as always. I really appreciate your time for that. Just to let you know that the Simcoe Muskoka Workforce Development Board and Literacy Network not only has the longest name going, but we have some tools that can help with apprentices. One is Soft Skills Solutions that focuses on the skills that you need to be successful in the workplace. And we also have FAST, which was originally, it was ARAT, and it has been put online, and it is available through the Simcoe Muskoka Workforce Development Board to assess skills for the trades sector. Before people go into the trades, they can do a FAST test and find out where they need to pick their skills up a little bit. So if anyone is interested in hearing about soft skills solutions or hearing about FAST, please feel free to reach out to myself or to reach out to Stephanie at the Simcoe Muskoka Workforce Development Board and Literacy Network. I would like to thank all of our presenters today for attending. Everyone had wonderfully interesting things to say, so much amazing information shared. And we're glad that you could all be here this morning to be involved in the presentation. We would very much appreciate it if you would go to the SurveyMonkey and complete the evaluation for today's event. We are always looking at ways we can improve. So thank you very much for your time. And if there are any questions, as I said, we will be sending out resources at the end when we've finished putting them all together, and we will be sending out this the link to this presentation so that you can review it, and you can make sure that you get all the information you possibly can from it. So thank you for today, and we appreciate it. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to Stephanie and Emily for doing so much hard work in the background. And I would just remind you that the evaluation link is in the chat. Thank you all. Have a good day.